Today's video is about the architecture of fear and what fear is not. And there is the biggest misconception which I guide you through. And by the end of this video, you most likely have a discernment and different understanding where your fear actually comes from and what you can do to regulate it or possibly dissolve it. When we look into the ancient traditions, fear is not an emotion. And that is the biggest misconception that is out there. So fear is a perception. Fear is something that happens in the mind. The emotion is triggered after that. It is not that the fear is an actual real feeling. The fear is something that connects us to something that is there that we cannot yet describe, that we don't have a framework for, but we can sense it. And from the sensing, which does not have an explanation, you probably know that you're somewhere and you really feel the hair on your arms stand up and you feel everything is inside of you is wants you to get out of the situation, but you don't actually know why. So you can see fear can be a higher form of perception for something you don't have the capacity for to explain, or you just don't simply have the framework. So there are a lot of different kinds of fears. Fear can be very well connected, of course, to some real life experience, which you don't want to have again. We all learn certain fears through our childhood. So fear is a discernment tool, not to get in a bad situation, not to hurt ourselves, or to get but just involved in things that are not good for us. So fear is something primarily we learn as a child. We are not born with fear. We learn it through interacting by ourselves, through our parents, and then just later when we grow up through certain experiences. And of course, then there is information we cannot process. So what normally the mind does is it reacts to everything we cannot integrate with fear. So we have fight or flight. We react to the unknown with fear. And fear can show up through phenomena like UAP, if you want to be very out there. Or fear can be also something just related to getting into a plane and going into a scanner for the first time. So fear is very much related to the unknown. We cannot describe, we don't have a framework for, and where fear is just a protection tool in the first moment to kind of give us a primary reaction to deal with the situation. But when we look into the fear we are actually talking about here, it's the state of fear that is lasting even though you do spiritual work, you do conscious work, you meditate, you read certain books, and then you still have this fear. So what I want to tell you is, if you have a good practice, a good traditional framework where you actually dissolve fear, this could be a very new concept for some of you. You have to dissolve fear and dissolve the unknown into a framework. And then within this framework, you certainly realize that, especially in the conscious field, when you try to expand your awareness and to integrate a lot of things that, and maybe besides 3D, you realize that fear lessens. So you get much, much more comfortable, you get relaxed. And the interesting thing is always when you get a framework that is actually true. So the mind is not something that you can trick. You cannot tell stories to your mind about why it should not have fear. I find this so super interesting. But when the mind hits something that is real, an explanation that is real, like it is a dimensional explanation, it gives context, the mind realizes that it is the truth. And only when that happens, the mind releases this fear in the consciousness and can integrate this released fear as a different form of energy or energetic state. So when you do for a long time a practice and you realize the fear is still there, it could be a very deep trauma that is triggering a lot of other things. But let's say that did not happen. Let's say you have the normal human fears and you say, okay, I feel this great state of awareness when I meditate, when I do things, but there is still these fears I have in daily life. Then you should check on your framework. Because what happened most likely is, of course, there are always exceptions, but most likely it happens that you did not make the switch from the feeling of fear as a reaction or emotion to a framework that is legit and true and lets your mind integrate that energy so the fear can be released, and it is a capacity you have now within another framework. What I realized over 25 years, modern frameworks don't do that. So you can be a very, in time of consciousness, you can read a lot of books which are conceptual, and a lot of topics work when you have the luxury to be constantly in a safe space, when you really can detach yourself, when you live in your own reality, when you can bring up walls. But when we talk about these tools and teachings, we have to see there's a reality test. And this is what I always tell my students. So does your fear solution stand the reality test? Does it give you a how to deal with a certain perception? Does it give you the strength to transform a certain fear into another energy? Does it give you the framework to explain this, what you feel, into something else that is true and it is helpful for you? We don't really like to dissolve fear because it sounds a little bit contradictory when I say that. But for example, when we go into the Vedic system, the Vedic system says it is connected to Raja and to Tamas. So both are qualities, they are comfortable with the states we created for ourselves. So I want to say, as strange as it sounds, the state of fear sometimes serves a purpose. And this purpose could be not to move, not to really develop, not to evolve, because it's just simply uncomfortable. And we have to get in contact with our next higher state of awareness. And this could demand a lot from us. So sometimes we prefer to stay in a state of fear. In the Vedic system, the solution to that is sattva. That is the quality, the guna of understanding and letting this understanding flow with a certain energy and integrate. So sattva is the quality of understanding for the things that happens, even if we cannot explain them completely, but a certain peace comes in when we practice that. I mean, we should not forget that a lot of possibly systems and energies, or however you want to call it, want humanity to stay in a state of fear. So fear is constantly triggered from everywhere. And I think it's very hard as a modern human being not to tap into this fear, because it's not that love is all around you. You could say fear is all around you. And for those of you who want to work with this fear, it is normal that it is not so easy, even if you have, achieved so much, or even if you really have a lot of qualities you embody and a lot of things you can do, and you do this spiritual or conscious practices, and the fear, but it kicks in and again. It's also because it gets triggered so much. And for that, it is so important that you have or choose a framework that is really stable, and it gives you the possibility to integrate and dissolve. And that is what you have in the ancient tradition. That does not come from a modern philosophy. So you have, whatever you do to dissolve your fear, you have to test it in through your mind. You have to test it in daily life. It does hold when you think differently suddenly, and when you feel differently. Then you know that the architecture of fear has changed. If you like this content, please like and subscribe. My name is Nicky Sabeti. You'll find a link to a first free discernment tool under the description. It's called Begin. Thank you for watching, and I see you in the next video.